When you live for Ithaca, may your journey be long and full of adventures and knowledge, wrote Konstantinos Kavafis more than a century ago, in 1911. The journey undertaken by the European project ITHACA, Histories and Archives for Migrant Agency, started from the idea that collecting, preserving and giving value and voices to stories of migrants and refugees is the very first step to promote politics of relief, empowerment, inclusion and participation.
The ITHACA project focuses on migration narratives in the past and present and analyzes them in a rigorous historical framework, offering tools to read these narratives in a unique platform.
This is a document dated the 10th of April 1973, which was received at headquarters from a UNHCR staff member who was working in what was then West Germany. So this 3-page document, which is one of millions in UNHCR's archives, reports on the arrival of refugees from Greece, who had been living in exile in various countries in Eastern European Soviet states in the period following the Greek Civil War, which happened in the late 1940s. But then these refugees had since moved on to claim asylum in West Germany during the 1960s and 1970s. In the document, as you can read, the correspondent describes the experience of these former partisan fighters and their families, how they arrived in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania and Bulgaria, and then found themselves stateless without the economic, legal or civil rights in their country of first asylum.
For millenniums, the Mediterranean region has been crossed by several and profoundly different forms of migrations and forced displacement. We need to save fragile and endangered sources of the modern and contemporary history for current and future generations.
What UNHCR Archives did with the ITHACA project is to take some of this record that we have in the UNHCR archives to make it more publicly accessible by creating catalogues of content that researchers internal to our agency, but also externally as well, can access, they can interrogate, and they can request the information either through our reading room or through a form of digital delivery, whether it's from us or using the ITHACA platform for this particular record. So in order to achieve that, we chose 2 large archival collections to make public as part of this project. Firstly, the UNHCR Central Registry, and also the working files of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Division of International Protection, which dealt with many legal matters in UNHCR's history and in fact still does. So by making 22,000 catalogue entries available to browse online and to have some of those records, including this one, available to view digitally, we hope that we can better communicate the research potential of the unique records that we're holding in the UNHCR archives.
We urge to preserve, analyze and use the narratives of migrants and on migration for the elaboration of historical knowledge and for a more effective development of current and future policies. Social and economic history unveils patterns of migration influence on societies.
We constructed a database with 32,000 marriages registered in our database. The first one concerns a marriage that took place in 1934 between refugee women from a city called at this time Makri, nowadays is Fethiye in Turkey. These women aged 24 years old, and the man she married aged 26 years old, a civil servant born in north of Greece in Macedonia. They both celebrated their first marriage. The girl arrived in Greece in the age of 14. Even if she has been recorded as housewife, it's very probable that she used to work until her marriage, and only because it was a habit, custom or a practice to stop working after the celebration of the marriage. And this is the main reason why we found the majority, the great majority of women recording in our super archive as housewives. We can see that the number of endogamy the marriage between refugees changed with the decades, and at the end, we can see, at the end, I mean after the Second World War, we can see that in these 8 municipalities, the percentage of intermarriage increased very much. We think that marriage and work are effective for the social cohesion.
I was reading a magazine from the main gay and lesbian organization in the 1990s, and there was an interview with one black and white photo of these 2 men. I don't know if they were a couple, but they are definitely, let's say, a duo. They lived together and they were trying to apply for asylum in the Netherlands based on the fact that they came from Russia. One was named Dimitri and the other was named Ivan. At the time, they were living on a houseboat, and they were hoping that they could get asylum in the Netherlands based on persecution. But the story that they told in 1992 sounded quite similar to the stories that you might hear today, which is that homosexuality is not actually illegal per se, but that homosexuals were being persecuted and prosecuted for reasons related to homosexuality and speaking open. And what I found unique about their story was how open they were.
A way to better inform the present is to create virtual environments where to access oral, written, and visual sources, and to foster in-depth studies of internal and external mobility across Europe and beyond.
I remember the person who narrated his story about this, how he and his family and his villagers were affected by floods. It happened in early May of 2010, one of most devastating floods in Azerbaijan. About 25,000 people became environmental migrants. So their behaviors, their emotions, tensions increased. The cemeteries of their ancestors were fully inundated by flood waters. So still, despite they are settled in a new area, as I know, many people still often visit the previous places of their residence. We're focused on environmental and climate-induced migration, and his story would be very interesting for us to know what happened during the flood that happened in the river of Kora, how they escaped, and what happened in post-migration period.
When studying present narratives of migration, it is essential to pay attention to the researcher's responsibility when they interview testimonies and analyze traumatic memories.
Our aim in this project was to provide an image, a vision of the diversity of migration in Jordan. We have to notice that Jordan is the second country which hosts the highest number of refugees in the world, after only Lebanon. And there is a diversity of migration in Jordan, even before the independence of the country. I collected the history of Syrian refugees because after 2011, with the beginning of the uprising and then of the violent conflict in Syria, more than 600,000 Syrian refugees arrived in Jordan. Among the history I collected, there is that of a man aged on 60 years old, was born in Damascus. And he first described the context that obliged him to leave Syria. In the 18th, once the security services in Syria began to arrest massively the opponent to the Assad regime, firstly he described this context and then started to talk about the choice to come to Jordan. Firstly, he came to Zarqa, a city where other Syrians were settled. Then he attempted to restart his studies, but it was not able. He tried to go to Yemen. This is a strange connection with Yemen, to work, but also it was difficult for him. And then he came back to Jordan and settled there. And since 14 years, he was not able to come back to Syria because of the political situation. So first of all, I thought to make some video capture, but in a second time, I thought that it was better to only take the sound because of the sensitivity of the political issue, and their history were very sensitive. They talked about torture, so I prefer to just only keep the sounds and to anonymize the interview.
Our historical and archival-centered approach is complemented by the contribution of various disciplines: geography, sociology, ethnography, and sociodemography. When researchers enter the fieldwork, a transformation happens for both them and the person involved in their work.
My methodology is ethnography, yes? And what is ethnography is collecting stories and trying to see the world from the other's perspective. And to do this, you really need to create links with those people. I collected many stories, but today I will tell you the stories of some young men that I met. So it was a collective interview. So there were 4 of them. And what they had in common is that they all came from Cameroon to Morocco as non-accompanied minor migrants. So I met them some years ago, before doing the interview. When they were kids, I realized that they were really kids, you know. It was kind of a play, you know. For example, they explained that they found a map that their old brother or some people in the village traced with the trajectory. So you need to go from this city to this city and this city, and they were so excited. Like, you know, they all spent between a year and 2 years from Cameroon to Morocco to arrive in Morocco. Of course, their ultimate goal was not Morocco at first. Yes, they wanted to reach Europe. They had this dream of Europe. Why? They also had in common that they all saw someone in the village, what they call an old brother, you know, someone who left, succeeded, and came back with money, built an house, came with a car. And this model of really doing something for the family, of course, they all have the same background in terms of poverty and difficulty to pay for schools, despite the fact that some of them were almost the level before university. But they stopped because they saw no future. They entered illegally in Morocco, and obviously it is impossible for them to go to Europe. When they decided that it was too risky, at least 2 of them, one is still, I think, reflecting, they decided to make Morocco their second home. So one of them, he was at that time living in the north of Morocco. He had no plan to leave because he did his training, he was working, he was beginning to make a little bit of money, and he decided to stay in Morocco. But they heard on social media, he heard that people were crossing, and he tried, his friend stayed, but he succeeded. So he spent a while in Centro, in Ceuta. So he spent some months there, and then he was transferred to the mainland in Spain, and then he went to France. And interestingly, he was an adult at that time. He was not a kid anymore, but he pretended, being still a kid, to be welcome in another protection house, and he succeeded. It is through this journey that they became men, some men. Yes, why? Because they discovered the world. They begin to reflect, to know what was happening in other countries. So it's like kind of a double message. Yes, don't take the road, but at the same time, if I am who I am now, it is because I was an adventurer. So in conclusion, there's no message go or don't go. It's like it's your destiny.
There are already so many people who have given their narratives, people who have really put themselves out there in order to tell their story, to openly say who they are and why they have experienced such difficulty that has led to an immigration that can be alienating at times, that can make you feel very much out of place and that you don't belong, and that you have put behind your education, potentially even a profession, to get to a new world where you hope for the best. They don't receive asylum. It's a reminder of all the stories we're missing, all the stories of the people who didn't have their cases accepted, people who did not succeed with their goal of applying for asylum, of starting a new life, of finding freedoms that they didn't think that they could experience at home.
One of the stories that stuck in my mind is that of a young Tunisian who returned in his country. After 6 unsuccessful attempts to cross the sea, they managed to reach Italy on the 7th time with a friend. He spent 5 years in north of Italy, working irregularly due to lack of paper. One winter night, he and his friend found themselves homeless in an old car and dependent in the street. They recount their childhood memories, but in the morning discovered that his friend had died of cold. Devastated, he contacted his family in Tunisia and decided to return voluntarily with the help of the Tunisian consulate.
Qualitative and archival research can be a powerful tool to explain the reasons behind the migration phenomena and to put them into a new context.
I remember the story of Khadija. She was crossed from Somalia to Turkey. And from Turkey, she went to Greece. She faced really hard experience. But at the same time, she was the one who, for example, always say, things will go better than today. She told me that she tried almost several times to take a ship or airplane from Greece, but was not easy to come out from Greece. And sixth experience, she told me that she decided to go by road in the Balkanic area to arrive in Italy. While she was telling her experience, she used kind of clothes to make kind of map, road map, to help us because she didn't remember the names of the places that she crossed. The idea of using artifacts, it was really a positive experience because sometimes are the objects who are telling the stories.
So we work through qualitative methods, in particular biographical approach is our preferred method, the one that actually we followed in the ITHACA project. It's a method which is pretty peculiar. Why? Because, you know, it implies that you as researchers establish a relationship with the interviewees, the people participating to your project.
First thing is that we made is a meeting with people to inform what is the object of our project. They were really accepted in some way to receive, to meet with us and tell their own experience. But one of the experience in this project, I remember when we meet with Somalis young people in Rome. I remember especially the girls. It was hard the first time. For example, one of them tell me who you are and what you are doing. While I'm making the presentation, the Archive of Migrant Memories and the project of ITHACA, what we are doing, I was saying that I'm Zakaria Mohamed Ali, a Somali brother, and what we are doing. No? One of them said, Somalis brothers are the one who, in Libya, work with human traffickers. That experience was hard for me, but at the same time I was thinking the experience that they faced in Libya was nothing the answer that hard for me.
I would like to tell you the story about Doris. Doris is a Nigerian woman that we met in southern Italy, in Calabria, a couple of years ago. And that story really impressed me very much because Doris is a lady in her late 20s now, but when she arrived in Italy, it was 2016. And Doris is an extremely nice woman. She's an artist, a makeup artist. She was working in Nigeria as a personal assistant of a very well-known artist, and she had a very fancy life, very interesting life. The only problem for her was that Doris is homosexual. So being homosexual in Nigeria means being very, very harshly discriminated. And actually Doris, although she was working in the artistic environment, she was very much obsessed by many people actually, trying to correct, let's say, her sexual orientation.
Good morning. My name is Doris Emmanuel. I'm a Nigerian. Yes, my sexuality is the reason especially why I decided and I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and I made it. And I'm glad I made it here, and I'm happy I made it this far, because people need to hear from me, get motivated from what I've said so far on my journey so far.
She was stuck in the desert for a few days without anything, but then she managed to survive and to find another trafficker who accompanied her in Libya. But her way to Libya was extremely difficult, because she knew from other travelers that she could risk a lot being a woman doing alone this trip. So Doris decided to disguise her sex. She wore a long jalaba, and she managed to pass as a man, not as a woman, because she was seriously worried to be sexually assaulted. And until a few months ago, Doris was still in Calabria, but then, together with her partner, they decided to move and to come to Milan because she had met us as a research team.
Qualitative archival research is not just preservation. It shows the potential of providing entangled analysis, including legal frameworks, policy documents, historical context, and original narratives, capable of supporting policies in the long term. Besides this, they are a potential tool to foster the agency of migrants.
Most of the knowledge on migration is usually built up through data, most of the time quantitative data, which are crucial, of course. But our approach is aimed at attempting as much as we can to make migrants protagonists of their own stories. As a researcher, we don't talk about migrants and about research participants, but migrants themselves, they have the possibility to speak. This is very important for us, because I think that if we actually have the chance as citizens, of Europe or Italy or any country, or policymakers or stakeholders involved in migratory field, to have the possibility to learn directly from those people who are the protagonists of the phenomena addressed by our policies, you can have a completely different understanding.
In planning, implementing and evaluating effective migration policies and migration management practices, all actors involved should constantly dialogue and share problems and solutions at the local, national and international level.
The dialogue should be based on research findings and reflections. This helps in maintaining a critical view and improves understanding and knowledge.